Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to the first edition of Get Quick, Get Sick, where I teach you to get sick quickly. I'm your host, Cryptochronica. You can check out the link for details on my music, socials, etc., etc. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about user libraries and how to organize them in an effective way that'll free up your time and your mind space as a producer in order for you to get the most out of your creative sessions. Now, when you are trying to switch your thinking from a sort of creative mindset to searching mindset where you have the great flow of things going through you and you're making sick beats and you're having a good time, but then you have to find the perfect sample. And so you're sorting through all kinds of different folders, looking for the right kick or the right snare. You're fundamentally changing your thinking from this sort of creative flow state to a librarian's thinking, an organizer's thinking, or a bureaucrat's thinking, and that is death to creativity. So we want to do these kinds of thinkings in different ways. So this comes to the concept of like prep work and creative work. And you want to have two different kinds of sessions for that. So there is a concept in the music production world between like prep sessions and work sessions. And a prep session is when you might only have a few hours to do some work, and you might not be able to get into it in a really detailed way. You might have an appointment in an hour, or you might be on an airplane with shitty little earbuds in your ears, and you can't hear everything super well. So in those time periods, it's not super worth investing hours into a mixing session or start trying to write a song because you're not going to finish it. So in order to get the most amount of worthwhileness out of those kinds of time frames where you're limited, you should use that time in what's called a prep session, where you build yourself puzzle pieces that you can then drag and drop when you want to use them in a creative session later. And so some things that you can be doing are sample management, sample organizing. This is when you should do sound design, and you should get nice sounding voices for your basses and stuff like that. And you can play with them and tweak with them in this kind of framework where you're not trying to be creative under a sort of time frame. That way, you can use it later on. So today we're going to talk about this kind of prep work, this kind of prep session work, and why it's really important in order to facilitate our creativity later on. As you know, I'm sure, no cook is going to show up for the dinner shift ready to cook for his high-paying clientele and not have a prep chef already have chopped up carrots and vegetables and prepped the butter and prepped the pots and pans and done the dishes for him. That's all stuff that happens earlier on in a restaurant. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is doing our vegetable chopping so that when we take it out of the fridge and we're ready to start fucking cooking that shit, it's going to be exquisite. So when I say user library, I'm talking about this area of Ableton that's often overlooked. And in the user library, you have all kinds of different folders that Ableton has so kindly generated for us. You have grooves, presets, blah, blah, blah. Each of these things you can assign certain favorites of yours for, or favorites of yours too. So that if you have like a family of samples that you really like down-tempo samples or trap samples or something like that, you can go to your user library and instantly recall them, which is great for a number of reasons. You can do the same thing with MIDI clips, and you can do the same thing with like chord progressions or arpeggios that you really like. So we're going to talk about some of that stuff. But you can also do that for audio effect racks. So say you spend a long time building this really complicated kick processing chain, which thickens the kick and also compresses the kick and gives it a little bit of pleasant saturation. You're like, holy shit, this is the magic sauce for my kick. And you want to save that audio effect rack, you can save it to your user library. It's effortless. And I'm going to show you how to do all of that stuff in a really effective way today in Get Quick, Get Sick. This should only take us about 15 minutes or so. So as you can see on my screen, I have a variety of different kicks. I'll just play a couple for you. Oh, those are so nice. What nice kicks. All kind of different, but all still part of the same down-tempo family. And because they are from the same family, I want them to be grouped in a way that's effective for my use and easy for me to find them if I'm ever making a down-tempo track. Same with our snares. So I'm going to introduce to you a concept that was developed by ill.Gates many years ago, but it's since become common knowledge. And that concept is the 128. In Ableton, you can load up a sampler, which is such a fabulous instrument, definitely the strongest instrument in Ableton. You should learn how to use it in a really deep way. I'll probably do a video about that later on in the future. But with a sampler, you don't have to just put one sample in at a time. So when you have a group of samples from a similar family, you can load up a sampler and select all of your samples and then drag those into your sampler. Oh, guess I didn't do that correctly. Come here, friends. All right, everybody, go on in there. So as you can see, I have 30 of 30 samples in here. That's not exactly what we're looking for. We're trying to make an 128. And the reason 128 is the magic number is because we can program our sampler so that every single key of the piano, of which there are 128, triggers a different sample. So when I open up the Zone tab, I can see all of my kicks are here. And every single one of these kicks has one of these bars that stretches across every single key of the piano keyboard here. So when I press any key, I will turn on my arm for my keys. When I press any key, every single one of these samples will play at a time. So I don't necessarily need that. That's just a huge kick that sounds like a bunch of mush. That's not exactly what I want. And I know that when I select all of them by pressing Command A, I can see that I have 30 of 30 samples selected. I'm trying to get 128 so that each one plays its own sample on its own key. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get more than 128 samples in here and divide them up equally across the entire keyboard. So I've selected them all, and I'm going to duplicate once. Now I have 30 of 60 selected. I'm going to select them all again. Now I have 60 of 60 selected. Duplicate, boom, 120, and one more duplication. Now I have 240 samples in this guy. That's too many, but that's fine. As long as you have more than 128, this thing works, this process works. When I select all of the samples again, I'm going to right-click and I'm going to distribute ranges equally across the keyboard. Now, each one of these kicks is triggered by the sampler on a different note of the keyboard. Super useful, and you'll see that, as you'll see why in just a minute. Now, for extra bonus points, I'm going to go down to the very bottom one, and you can see that on the last key of the keyboard, all of these samples are triggered with that one key. It's going to be a big kicky mush puddle. I do not want that. So I'm going to select my bottom one, come all the way up to the one just before the very last one, and I'm going to delete those. Now I have a completely distributed range of 128 kicks. Super cool. I'll close down the Zone tab, and now I can play my kicks. Cool. So as I'm making a beat, I can find the right kick that I want super effortlessly. So if I'm going to make a kick beat and I do something like this, I can play it. Okay, maybe I don't like that sample. Now I can select them all and go up. And without doing much work, I get a different sample every single time. You can see the implications of this. Cool. I'll leave that there. Now, how do I save that to my user library in an effective way? I could go over here and I could click. I'm going to show you the wrong way first, and then I'm going to show you the correct way. I could just click Save right here. And that Save button will take us into user library, into presets, into instruments, into sampler, and then this nameless nonsense. So that's not the most effective way to save it, because if I ever want to find these kicks again, I've got to type in all this shit, or I've got to come into my sampler. That's not super useful. So I'm going to show you how to organize it in a way that is much more useful. So I'm going to delete that. I don't want that there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to group this. So right-click the sampler, and I'm going to push Group. Now that it's in a group, I can open up the instrument macro rack pack of it, the side that you saw me open. And now if I save this here, it's going to be saved to my instrument racks. And when I start saving everything to instrument racks, I know that there's only one place in my user library that they've all been consolidated to, instrument racks. So they're much easier to find. So I'm going to save this and I'm going to name it. I'm going to name it 128 because that's what it is. It's a 128 of down-tempo kicks. Now I know the flavor, it's down tempo, I know the instrument, it's kicks, and I know that it's a 128. And would you look at that, it's been saved to my instrument rack as opposed to the sampler section, which has that other kind of useless stuff in it. So when you start grouping things like this and you save everything to an instrument rack, it's way more concise and it saves you a ton of searching time later. Let's do exactly the same thing with our snares here. I'm going to select all our snares. And I am going to drag them down to the bottom, and Ableton automatically, well, I thought it would automatically generate a sampler for us. Let me try that again. Ableton, do what you're supposed to do. Nope, okay, I've got to grab a sampler. So I've loaded up a sampler here, and now I'm going to grab my snares for the last time and pull them into my sampler. Cool. Now I have 30 of 30 again. If I go into the zone tab, I'm going to select them all, duplicate once. Now I have 30 of 60. Select all, duplicate, and duplicate. Now I have 240 again. Again, select them all, right-click, distribute ranges equally. Cool. I'm going to go down here and close out the ones on that last tab because I don't need a bunch of snares to make an impact all on my final key. Not that I would ever hit that key anyway. And this way I have 30 different claps and snares distributed equally across the keyboard. Super, super useful. So that is, oh, let me save this. I'm going to right click it. I'm going to go to group, and then I'm going to open up the macro rack part of it and go to save. Here I can do 128. Let's do down tempo because that's the family. Snares. Sweet. Super effortless. All of those have been saved. And now if I don't have either of these tabs, say I have nothing, I'm going to make a new MIDI track. Now, if I don't have either of those tabs and I have a new project with nothing in it, I can immediately start producing and creating by dragging out my down-tempo kicks and then Command-Shift-T to make a new MIDI track, down-tempo snares. Look at that. It's so quick, so effortless. Chill. So that's how you save things that's how you save 128s into an instrument rack. There's other things you can save too, and you probably should. We should save MIDI notes. Why? Because MIDI notes, you can come up with a good progression or come up with a good chord progression or a scale or an arpeggio or something like that that you like that you don't necessarily want to use in that song. And if you want to save it, you can do the same exact thing, but you'd save it to a different area of your user library. So in my user library, I have all of these different clips. Under MIDI, I have different chord progressions and different scales and different things like that that have been saved from previous projects. And I can effortlessly drag those in. And look, now I have a lead that I've created at a prior time. Come on, friend, come on. Oh, Ableton, I know you can do it. Uh-oh, we got the spinning beach ball of death. Maybe it can't. The things we live with. Yeah, I guess I need my eye lock, huh? No wonder it's fussing. There we go. Such a dumb invention. Why couldn't it have just been saved digitally? All right, friend, you can do it now. You can do it now. I had to pick the one audio file or MIDI file that is throwing a fit. Oh my goodness. It's because there's all this bullshit processing on top of this thing. All right. Regardless, you saw what I did. So say I generated that another time and really wanted to save it. It's super easy. You go to your user library, you go to the MIDI, and you can make new folders. So say I have, let me make a new folder. I'm going to right click, new folder. I'm going to say, oops, not under riffs. Let's delete that. Yes, move that to trash. Under MIDI, I'm going to go to new folder. We're going to call this one leads. So now I have a bunch of, I have a leads folder. Say I had this, I could just drag and drop, boom, and now it's going to be there, saved, and I can put this into any kind of MIDI note or any kind of MIDI player and get all kinds of different voices doing this one thing. Sweet. I'm going to delete that because I don't actually want it. Now, I'm going to give you guys a gift, and if you subscribe to my channel, you will be able to use this all the time. Isn't that generous of me? Here we go. This is called Chords, and I'm going to give you scales. The reason I'm giving you these things is so that you can instantly drag and drop them into your project and use them however you want. Now, I have a bunch of different chords here, all in the key of C, and I think, I'm going to turn off this voice, I think they're all in the piano sound, but just in case they're not, let me grab a piano. I like to write my chords in pianos because it's really clear, and if it sounds decent in the piano, it'll sound good under another voice. If it sounds shitty under a piano, it's going to sound shitty in any other fucking voice. So I like the MKL3 mellow piano. It's, you know, a little bit cheesy, but also a little bit pleasant. So we're going to go back to my user library, and I'm going to pull in different chords. I have C suspended for, oh, isn't that so lovely? The C7, the C diminished, or the C suspended diminished, pardon me, and the C diminished, a C minor, a C major, and a C major 7, C major 9, blah, blah, blah. You can see them as I pull them out. I don't have to say it. And finally, the C minor 9th. And the minor 7ths and minor 9th chords and major 7ths and major 9th chords are very much used in jazz, house, and funk. Very cool chords. Now, what are you going to do with a bunch of C chords? There's not many progressions that you can make just going from one different type of C chord to another. Well, have no fear. When you have a bunch of chords like this and they've been saved, all you have to do is transpose them over to make yourself a chord progression. Let's do like an E major chord, like an E minor chord progression. So I'm thinking like E minor, and then maybe like a C, and then a G, and then we'll round off nicely with an E minor. So now I have C minor, C major, C major, C minor. Useless. It's not going to sound like anything good at all. Let me actually speed it up because we're kind of down tempo, so I want these to happen a little bit quicker. All right. Look at all that good shit. Still same chord progression, it's just much faster. Oh. So we want this to be pleasant. I said we're going to do something in E minor. So if I consolidate this, I can go down here, and I see that my bottom note, which is the root note of my chord, is a C. So all I have to do is come up to E. Oh my goodness, so easy. Now it is an E minor chord. Awesome. I'm going to rename it because I don't want to confuse myself. So I've got an E minor. Then I said the next chord we were going to do was going to be C major. Oh, well, we already have a C major, so we don't have to change that one. Now I'm going to select all, and I'm going to go to a G major. I'm going to consolidate this and cut those little tails off. There we go. Consolidate is Command J. So now my root note is still a C. So I'm going to go up to the G position right there. Now I've got that. And then finally, we're ending again on E minor. In this case, I can just copy this guy over. Boom. Now we have a chord progression that's actually worth listening to. Sounds like every Green Day song ever written. All right. So that is why you would want to save chords, because once you have the C's, you can just transpose them around to get any kind of chord progression you want, and it'll save you tons of time. So I'll give you the chords, and I'm also going to do the same thing with the scales. Same thing with the scales. You can just take them and transpose them as you want. Each of these are 2 octaves of scale. So you're going to get everything from 0 to 24 semitones in scalage. And as you can see, each one's different. Major scale, minor scale harmonic, and then I have the melodic scale descending. So that's the one that you're going to play when you're going down the scale, or the melodic scale ascending if you're going up. It's a really interesting form of music theory you don't really need to understand to write good music, because you can program it. Then I'm going to give you the minor scales in the natural form. So that would be like most minor keys, most house, most rock if it's a minor song, most pop, blah, blah, blah. So you have those now, and you can take them and store them to your user library in order to use those clips later on. I'm not going to give you my chord progressions, and I'm not going to give you my riffs yet. So maybe stay tuned for another episode and you can get that shit. I'm also not licensed to give you these down-tempo samples, so I unfortunately cannot give you those. What I can do is I'll make you some samples and I'll give them away next time. But here you go. You got some chords, you got some scales, and let me show you how to make a cool rack. Let me make a MIDI rack on top of this chord progression. Actually, I'll just go, yeah, I will just make you another one really quickly. We will do C minor, do that. So again, I'm just going to transpose these for them to work for me. I actually do want some majors. I will do that thing that I was just doing. So we will do a C major, and then I did a G major, and then it was an E minor. So here going up to E, boom, C major going at C, G major going to G. What's that? Oh, interference! And then we're going to do another E minor. Chill. So what's our voice? Let me grab something a little bit more interesting. Oh, can we load that up? Can we load that up? Yes, load that up on here, friend. Load that up on here. Oh, it's not going to give me the instrument. It's just going to give me the MIDI file. All right, I'll just use I'll use something else from my user library. So that way you can see how quick it is to pull in instruments that are actually worth having. Now I will go to user library. I'm going to type in instrument. I'm going to go to my presets. I'm going to go to instruments themselves and instrument rack. Remember, I'm saving everything to instrument racks. So in here, I've got all kinds of different drums, all kinds of different basses, all kinds of things that I've cultivated over the years that will help speed up my process in cases like this, where I want to make a demonstration for somebody. So let me find some chords, basic bitch house pluck. It's a nice one. I'm thinking, yeah, let's do something like this, future house thing. Again, I'm just doing this so that I can show you a very quick demonstration on how to save racks. So we have this. Cool. All right, pretty boring. Say I wanted this to do something a lot more interesting. Say I wanted this to you know, wobble and be delayed and spread out and reverb on every certain hit. It's really easy to make yourself an instrument rack. You can load up an auto filter, which would be a good place to start for future house. And then say you've got a nice delay and we can do a cool sort of, what should we do? Let's do an echo sound. Echo's fun. All right. So now we've got this whole thing. And say you want to modulate this so that it starts off low, and then it comes on a little bit higher in the chord. We're going to go to our automation zone. So I'm turning that off. Now I can press A and toggle into the automation zone. So say I have this open up like so. We'll do that, and I'll copy this on over. And we'll have each of these rise ever so slightly, a little bit more over here, and finally all the way open. Now we've got this. Cool, so it's coming in. Now, if I want to save all of these combinations, say I really like what this is doing, which I don't, but say I do, we'll actually just turn that off. I can save all of this stuff really effortlessly. Let's have it so that this also automates on towards the end and isn't there in the beginning, and we'll have the feedback change around a little bit. Well, if I want this all to be one rack and one group, I can select this all and I can press group, and now this is going to be in one group. And over here, I can do the same thing as my instrument channels. I can save this little floppy disk icon to my user racks, or to my racks under my user library. So in this case, I find that using frequency knobs and using different automations on like your dry wet over here, say I automated this like that, that's like getting really messy and chaotic. And say I duplicate this over, oops, say I, oh, damn it. There we go. Say I duplicate this over, this can get really messy with if I start to cut different things. And say like right here, I want something different, I cut that, or I want this to be slightly different. Say I want that one to not be there and this one to not be there because I'm checkerboarding in other instruments, which is something you do all the time in production. What happens with automation is it gets really messy. That line, I didn't program that line. Why is Ableton inserting that? These lines, I didn't program that. That's not how it was before I cut it. So Ableton can't help itself. It somewhat damages the automation lanes when you press delete. And that's not exactly what we want. So doing a lot of automation can also often be really sloppy and really messy. So it's better to just do like one thing of modulation on an effects rack at a time. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to undo all of that shit that I had just done and go back to our single thing. So instead of using this, which has a huge range from 26 hertz, which is absolutely silent, you can't hear that, all the way up to 19,000 hertz, which only the most precise of hearing of children or dogs can hear, that's not a range that's super useful. So let's set this parameter in a range that's really, really useful for us. And it will make the whole machine, the whole instrument, more manipulatable and more controllable to our taste. Same with this dry wet thing. I don't want to be able to go to 100% wet. 100% wet delay means that there's no actual voice there of the original tone. So that's not what we want. We want about 50% at the fucking most, and most likely we don't even want that. So I'm gonna get rid of that as well, and kill all of our automations so that we have a clean slate. And now I'm gonna map these different parameters to our macros so that we can set them precisely. And that will make it worth it to save this instrument because we've spent just a few extra minutes doing this correctly so that when we drag this puzzle piece from our prep session and our user library into our sort of creative session, it will already be manipulated for us. We will have already framed the parameters under which it's operating. So I'm going to right click here and I'm going to map that to macro 1. So now I have my frequency mapped to macro 1. They're doing exactly the same thing from 26 hertz all the way up to 19,000 hertz, which again is too much. And I'm going to map our delay to the frequency. So now I have one parameter controlling both things. I'll also do that. I like the ping pong sound. That's a good one. And I want to frame these so that they're not going all the way silent and not going all the way open. And I also don't want this to be at 100% wet. So under mapping, I enter the MIDI mapping mode, and you can access this by pressing, I think it's Command M. Oh no, that's something else. Just click the button. There you go. Under here, I can set my parameters so that my frequency of my auto filter tied to macro 1 can be set to something much more controllable. 150 is often a really good place to cut filters because you can still hear them, you can hear the instrument poking through just a little bit, especially with basses and chords. But we could go even higher. We could go to 220. That's also a good place. So this way, when it's at its lowest, it's still peeking through. It has a little bit of a presence coming through in the lows. So it hasn't completely disappeared from our hearing. And I'm going to set it so that at its highest, it's closer to 12,500 because we want to leave a lot of, we'll talk about mixing stuff later, but I don't want it to be all the way open because we can't hear past a certain hearing threshold. Most humans can hear between 30 hertz at its lowest and 18,000 hertz if your hearing is good at your highest. Kids can hear a little bit higher in their frequency range, but they lose that by the time they're fucking 20 and by the time they go to like 10 Tool shows. All right. Now, as for our delay, we want to do the same thing. I don't want this to be 100% wet, so I'm just going to come down here to, let's say 35% wet. That's at its maximum. That's a pretty good place. But I also want it to be present even when this thing is off, so maybe I'll have it come to, 8% wet. And so that way, as I turn on my macro, you can see my wetness increases to 35% and my filter increases to 12,500. Now I can close this and I don't even have to worry about it. I'm just manipulating one macro for two parameters, and I could tie any number of parameters in here. I could map the frequency, I could have the LFO come on as we do it. All that stuff is for another session. I just want to make a point here. And my point is this: it's much easier to have a rack that does one feature, one function with a lot of complicated things happening, as opposed to having all these complex automations interweaving and damaging your track when you cut things or copy things. So let us just put this on really quickly, and I will do something. What should we do? I guess we'll just do a very simple 8th bar division of rising. So I'm gonna go to B, and I'm making little triangles. Triangles are a great shape. That's what we're doing as producers. We're playing with squares, triangles, rectangles. Those are pretty much the shapes of choice that we use. And I'm going to shape it a little bit like that, like a dorsal fin. That works really well in Future House. So those are eighth divisions. We'll do 2 of 8s, and at the very end here, just for kicks, why don't we do some triangles in quarter notes? So it'll be a lot faster. And here is triangle, come on, go away. There we go. Here is triangle 1. And now we will copy that over and we'll have triangle 2. And I'm gonna shape it a little bit more like a dorsal fin, because again, that is a really pleasant sort of sound in Future House. Boom. To get those curves that I'm getting, I'm holding Alt and then I'm curving it like so we get the dorsal fin shape. Now I will, get out of modulate. What am I going to do? I'll just copy that over. Boom and boom. Chill. So this is what we have now. Chill. Easy. If I leave that open, it should echo out. And I can also go back in here and I'm going to remap the filter so that it doesn't completely cut it off when it goes away. So this is a little bit of a higher pitched synth. So maybe I'll do something at like 450 hertz as opposed to 220, so that we have a little bit of that low end staying in even when the filter is all the way down. Cool, that's a little bit better. Still not great. We would do a lot more things to the synth to make it fucking awesome, make it fucking sick, which is the point of good dance music. Make it fucking sick. All right, chill. So I have this thing that I kind of like. It's been shaped. It's got a little bit more detail than a bunch of different randomly assimilated effects racks that have been placed in the chain behind my instrument. This is something that I would use again, theoretically. So I can save this. I could also name it. I'm going to actually name it first this time. To name something, you click it, make it blue, go Command R, new name. We're going to call this delayed, oops, no capitals. I'm not screaming at somebody online. Delayed filter. Woo, such a deep name. And now I can press save. And in this case, it goes from my user library. It goes all the way into presets where they all go. Everything goes to presets in your user library. And then it goes to audio effect racks, audio effects, audio effect racks. And then down here, you can see my huge list of audio effects that I made over the years that I use all the time in songs all the time. And if I want to use them in this song, drag it over, drop it, and we have a new effect that we can introduce. One speed, saving us a ton of time in the composition process there. Whoa, that's so trippy. How'd you do that? Now you know. All right, guys, thanks for this edition of Get Quick, Get Sick. Please subscribe, please like, please follow. I'm going to be doing a lot of these videos lately. It's 2020 and time to step up my game by sharing it with the masses. Again, my name is Cryptochronica. Thanks for tuning in. Peace.